to record this. So one of the characteristics of leading from every level is authentic leadership, and that really comes from being true to ourselves. So Ralph Waldo Emerson, he says, to be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment of all. And this is something that we can all relate to, especially in a world right now where we're influenced in so many different ways, whether it be the people we work with or social media and everything that is just being put in front of us at all times. Being true to yourself really is that biggest accomplishment, and that's what we're going to talk about in this session today. So we're going to start with some breakout rooms, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can go ahead and get you into those sessions. In those breakout rooms, we're going to have 5 minutes, and then we're going to have 5 minutes to share when we get back. I want you guys to talk about what authentic leadership means to you. So I'm going to pair you off. Mary, again, I'm going to keep you here so that the three of you can discuss in your huddle, in your own office. But really just take some time, give space for everyone to speak, to talk about this idea of authentic leadership, what that means to you, or how you've seen it demonstrated in your own world. So let me go ahead and stop share. We've got 25 people, so I'll put you in groups of 5. Or so. I'm just going to take a minute here to do this so I can make sure that I leave Mary out and her group. All right, so again, about 5 minutes or so to discuss, and then we will share when we get back.
You'd be thinking one thing, they really said something.
It's always surprising how fast 5 minutes can go by, isn't it? I heard someone talking as you guys came back, so that's great. It sounds like you were having some great discussion in your rooms. I'm going to go ahead and pull my slides back up so that you can see them here. And I will go ahead and kick things off since we have one comment that already came in from the chat from the team over at Stone Specialist. And let me pull that back up here so I can share it with you all. So in our small groups, we discussed what is authentic leadership. And Mary, Cameron, and Robert from Stone Specialist, they said, authentic leadership is having integrity. Leaders and followers must trust each other to develop a strong team. And then they also shared the example that new employees tend to look to veteran employees as examples of how to conduct business knowledge and how to complete tasks. So thank you guys for putting some thought into that. Who else would like to share on behalf of their group?
I can share, Bree.
Thanks.
So our group, we talked a lot about transparency and vulnerability and how an authentic leader really needs to have those characteristics, as well as needing to understand and appreciate kind of the give and take. So, their leaders not expect too much of them, not expect too much of their team, but be able to find that balance of the give and take and expectations. And also to really let the team know what the goals are and kind of what they're working for. So being able to, have those goals clearly defined and not just be there to be a friend and kind of let the team, go along completing tasks, but to help kind of guide and lead them, obviously, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about those boundaries. And 2 of these words that are going to come up quite a bit in our discussion today, transparency and vulnerability, those are great. And they're easier said than done, right? We're going to talk about that in just a little bit. Who else would like to share what their group talked about?
Good morning, Brianna. This is Tari.
Hey, Tari.
Hi. And I was in a group with Sean, Trifina, and Stephanie. And we talked a lot about self-awareness being a part of being an authentic leader, being willing to look in that mirror. Other words that came up were things like discipline, integrity, having a commitment to bettering not only yourself, but bettering others. There was some great insight on that. Leaders need to be goal oriented and not just results oriented. That you can have a clear process of developing yourself and others, but keeping your eye on those goals rather than like number type of results. That way, the true growth isn't lost because your focus is on those end results and not on those goals.
That's great. Thank you. And I love this, what you said about self-awareness and being able to look in the mirror. It's such an important part of being a strong leader. And like I said, we're really trying to work on that muscle of building some self-awareness. But I love the idea of taking it one step further. So self-awareness is so that, again, we're aware of how we're perceived to those around us. But self-awareness can really be stepping up to admit when you make a mistake. And we'll talk about that in a little bit later in this presentation. Leaders, especially when that leadership comes with a title, they often don't like to admit their faults, admit their mistakes. But I had a leader in the past who, you know, we had a situation, it wasn't handled real well, and they came back and acknowledged that this is how I handled the situation, this is how I should have handled the situation, and that just made me respect them so much more because they demonstrated that self-awareness, but used it to kind of apologize for their mistake. And admitting when we're wrong or admitting our mistakes is an important piece of growth and learning for everyone. Thanks, Tari. Who else would like to share?
I can share.
Hey, Sammy, go ahead.
Okay. All right. In addition to a lot of the things that the other groups have already brought to the table, one of the things that our group talked a lot about was that idea of relationship building. So taking the time to build connections with your team and sort of creating that we atmosphere. So it's not, you know, me telling everyone on the team what to do, but this idea of we're all working together towards that goal. And really creating this environment of inclusivity where everyone's opinion is heard, but also valued. So I know that, you know, if I have an opinion, I can share it and I'm not going to be criticized for it, but I feel like it's going to be considered, you know, or at least appreciated, and I'm not going to be judged for that opinion, even if it's different than the rest of the team.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Okay, any other groups want to share before we move on? All right, so a lot of what you're going to see up here has already been shared, so you guys are right on the mark when it comes to authentic leadership. Authentic leadership really comes down to matching your actions with your words and being transparent in who you are with others. It is a moment-by-moment choice to lead adaptively from our core. So it's something that we need to use sort of as that North Star to always come back to and question if we're leading from our true self. It requires a strong sense of self-awareness. So defining those core values as thrown out in the journal prompts last week will be an important practice for you to do. And thank you, Jessica. I saw in the chat that you shared your core values as being honesty, integrity, and authenticity. You try very hard to be transparent as a person and as a team member. So thank you for that as a member of our team. But thank you again for sharing those core values and working on your self-awareness. And then finally, it's a genuine effort to lead from our hearts. And we see a lot of leaders who, like Tari said, are results oriented because they're leading from their head, but goal oriented gets back to that inclusivity, like Sammy said, in making sure that we're building a sense of we and bringing others along with us. But like I said earlier, it's really easier said than done. Authentic leadership, although it seems like it would be natural to us because it's truly who we are, is something that requires work. And the reason for that is because there are things, whether it be in our personal lives or in our work lives, that make it difficult for us to be our true self. So I would like to open it up to the group here before we talk about the work that it takes and ask, what is it that prevents you from being your true self, your authentic self, whether it be in your influence with others, whether it be in your personal life? What are some of those things that you can think of off the top of your head? And feel free to come off of mute or type it in the chat, whichever you would prefer.
Bree, I'll share. I think that fear is probably my biggest problem with being authentic because, there's always that fear that, other people aren't going to like who you really are.
Okay.
And so that a lot of times governs, how authentic and how transparent a person is because, I'm a terrible introvert. I'm not outgoing. And so for me, knowing that, people are going to listen to me and take me, at face value helps a lot with being more authentic. And it's something that kind of grows over time, where once you feel more comfortable with a person, you can be more authentic with them. But I'm going to say fear is probably the biggest.
Thank you, Jessica, for that. And fear can heavily influence our self-talk, right? So when we are afraid of a situation, afraid of what someone else might think, that starts that self-talk of like all of the worst possible things that could happen, or all of the worst possible things that people could think, and it stops us from taking that next step. So great self-awareness, Jessica. Thanks for that.
And I would just add, I would say people taking your passion or you leading from your heart as a weakness because you are more empathetic for others, or, willing to show grace when other people feel like you may not need to. So again, that taking your strength, what you feel as a strength as a weakness, and trying to manipulate you or turn it against you in some kind of way.
Yeah, that's a really, really great point. Thank you so much for sharing that. And that empathetic part of you, that sensitive part of you, I was told that I was too sensitive my entire life. And it wasn't really until my late 20s that I realized it's such an important part of who I am. And it makes me relate to people more because I don't have those walls built up. So just like you said right there, it's definitely a strength. It's just all about how you look at it and how you use it. We have a couple of comments here in the chat box. Katie Yellow, biggest barrier to being authentic is influence of others, especially when building social capital, especially when coming to a new city, right? Sean says here, expectations of others. So especially from managers who may not be genuine leaders, those who create false measurements of internal validations of how busy the team is rather than how effective their actions are. Sean, do you want to elaborate on that a little more?
Sure, thanks. Having worked in different levels of retail management and sales and customer service, what you often find is that people in management create these matrices that kind of validate the fish stories, but don't actually talk about the real interconnectivity between the people, the actual identifying of needs and listening and trying to connect benefits and solve problems. A lot of the stuff that you spend a lot of time in organizations large and small is just going through the steps of validating the steps, but not actually understanding the intention behind them.
That's a great point. Thank you so much for sharing that. All right. So like I mentioned, and these are all, great points, but we can do it. It just takes a little more work. So authentic leadership really requires us to slow down and connect more deeply, not only with ourselves, but with others as well. So that kind of gets back to what Sammy shared a little bit ago about building those relationships with our team members. It's, again, not natural for all of us. Some of us come in and we just want to get to work, get the work done, and that's what we're here to do. But stepping into our authentic self and authentic leadership does require us to break down those walls a little bit. It also requires us to have a clear understanding of our values and sense of purpose. So again, if you haven't had a chance to use that journal prompt, I would strongly recommend taking some time to really think about what your values are, and in relation to not just authentic leadership, but your circle of influence and how that helps you influence others and bring them along. It also requires us to overcome fears like not fitting in or being respected. So Jessica, thank you for your vulnerability and sharing your fears of what other people might think, but we don't know until we try, right? And it's great within our close circle to have those who are willing to give us some genuine and open feedback from, you know, a place where we know their heart, we know where they're coming from, and that can help us overcome fear of what other people might think. And then finally, understanding what authenticity is to everyone else. So everyone defines this word differently. Making sure that we're having those open and honest conversations is really what's going to help us not only demonstrate it to each other, but bring it out in others as well. So we're going to watch a quick video from Brene Brown. We talked a little bit about her, I think, in the last session. She literally wrote the book on authenticity, and you're going to hear a lot of these words that we've been using come up in her discussion. So we'll watch the video, and then we'll come back for a little bit of group discussion on what she has to say about stepping into your authentic self and demonstrating authentic leadership.
One of the things that I love in, I think it's the first book, The Gifts of Imperfection, you talk about being a wholehearted person. Now, my definition of spirituality is living an open-hearted life. So open-hearted, wholehearted. What does it mean to be a wholehearted person? You have actually, you know, a list of 10 different qualities that wholehearted people have in common. And so cultivating authenticity, letting go of what people think. That's the first one. Let's talk about that.
It's so hard. I thought doing this research, I thought going into it, there were authentic people and inauthentic people.
Mm-hmm.
I did not find any evidence of that at all. What I found is authenticity is a practice, and you choose it every day, sometimes every hour of every day. And it's a practice. It's not, I just wake up and, hey, I'm authentic. It's that when you walk into a meeting, you have to make the choice. Am I gonna show up and let myself be seen? Am I gonna raise my hand and say, wow, y'all look super excited. I don't know what in the hell you're talking about. I'm so lost. You know, that's a choice.
Yes, uh-huh.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And to make that authentic choice, you gotta let go of
the fakeroo, I say.
Yeah.
I call it the fakeroo. But you know what? I have found, I mean, I consider myself to be an authentic person, but when I am inauthentic is when I've allowed myself to be around people who were not, and then I have to fake it to be with them.
Oh, for sure. It's contagious.
Yes. So they're faking it,
Yeah.
and you know you're in that situation when you do that, that kind of, you're laughing at jokes that aren't funny, you're pretending to be comfortable when you're not, and lose your own authenticity.
Yeah, and I do it.
So letting go of what people think. Okay, cultivating self-compassion, letting go of perfectionism, because there is no such thing.
No, and this was, you know, first of all, you know that this is what led, these 10 guideposts that emerged from the research is what
Yes.
led to the breakdown.
Yes.
Like this did not make me happy.
Because you were like 2 out of the 10.
I was 2 out of the 10 and I was cheating.
And you're writing the book.
Right. And so I had to put the data away. I didn't write the book until I was in therapy for a year and a half.
Wow.
And I went to a therapist with an Excel spreadsheet that said, here are the things that I need more of. I've got 6 weeks. Go.
Fix me.
Fix me.
Fix
she
me.
said, yeah. But no, so here's what I learned about.
Oh, I love that you went to a therapist that sees therapists.
Yeah.
And that you started out by saying, look, I just want to be fixed. And I don't want to talk about that mother stuff and all that.
No,
the
no
past.
childhood BS.
No childhood BS. Let's just get to it.
Tips and techniques, baby. Bullet points. Bullet point me. Save me.
Tell me what to do.
Yeah, no.
Wow. Wow.
So perfectionism, what emerged for me in the data was that perfectionism is not about striving for excellence or healthy striving, which
Yeah.
I'm for.
Yeah.
It's a cognitive behavioral process, a way of thinking and feeling that says this: if I look perfect, do it perfect, work perfect, and live perfect, I can avoid or minimize shame, blame, and judgment.
You know what I thought when I was reading this? I had another aha. Aha.
2 people.
This was my other aha. That perfectionism, I never gotten this before until I read this, that perfectionism is the ultimate fear, that the people who are walking around as perfectionists, who have to have everything so, that they are ultimately afraid that the world is going to see them for who they really are and they won't measure up.
There's no question. That's what it is
That's
for
correct,
me.
right?
That's exactly
Okay.
what it is. Yeah,
Okay.
it's fear. And
Because it's very different than trying to be excellent and
No,
working
yeah.
hard and doing your best. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I call perfectionism the 20-ton shield. We carry it around thinking it's going to protect us from being hurt.
Yeah.
But it protects us from being seen.
Yeah, it's interesting because I know people who are, and I actually think, kind of sad because you're striving for a world that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And I can see right through it.
God, it's so slippery. I'm like a recovering perfectionist. For
Really?
me, it's like one day at a time. Yeah, because like if I'm feeling
How did it show up for you?
academically in my work, like if we've missed church for a couple of Sundays, my kids are going in starched outfits on that Sunday, the next Sunday, like, just be beyond judgment, which there's no such thing.
Yep.
All right. Thoughts on that video? Talked a lot about fears that come up, a lot about wanting to be so perfect, and that being one thing that inhibits us from being our true authentic self, but perfect by whose standards? Sean kind of shared an example that alluded to that, the expectations of others. So making sure that we're setting up the measurements of how we measure ourselves. What did you guys take out of that? Again, feel free to come off of mute or type it into the chat.
Hey, Bree. So for me, I've always had this, I guess, fear of what people think of me, which keeps me from being vulnerable sometimes and being my authentic self. And, I always wonder why that was because I'm not the type of person that feels like everyone needs to be my friend or, I don't need the accolades. But what really resonated with me, was when she said it was because you're afraid of not measuring up. And I think that's what it boiled down to me, just the fear that I'm not good enough, that I'm not measuring up. And that's really a me issue and not a them issue. But that's what really resonated with me because I couldn't figure out why I was worried about how other people saw me.
Yeah, but great self-awareness, and think of, your circle of influence and the size of your team. If you show up as your authentic self in your position every single day, think of how that influences others to do the same. And think of how that boils over to how we work together as a team, how productive we are, how much we enjoy what we do. It really is a ripple effect. Mark says here in the chat, seeing a world that doesn't exist. Mark, do you want to elaborate on that?
Sure. This is probably a huge problem for or it's a divider for me when I'm working with groups because I have this. So we're working in Flint. I see Flint as a huge opportunity that we can do some amazing things. But most of the groups, in fact, I'm having trouble. Trifina may be the exception. There are a couple people that are exception. They can't see beyond survival. And we live a pretty tough life here. I live in the city in a very poor part of the area. And so I go into meetings with this vision of people say I'm looking at utopia. I'm living a fantasy world, but I do. That's what motivates me. And then I sort of heard Oprah say, "Seeing a world that doesn't exist," and I'm thinking, "Wow, maybe my expectations are too high." And you know what? I don't want to believe that.
Thank you, Mark. Trifina, I saw that you came off or on camera to add something. Do you have something you want to add as well?
Yeah, I was just from the video, when we strive for perfection, and never really sharing with others. Like we only share the good with others and not really the process or the pitfalls and things like that, then we're not really being authentic. And so that's what I took out of that, because a lot of times, especially early on in I know in my career, it was like, I got to get this right, or I got to, be that straight A student, and you kill yourself trying to do it because again, we don't, every person, whether it's an instructor or a boss, they all have different expectations. And so if you know that you're doing it your best, you can always learn and improve and enhance your abilities, but be okay with that and share with others your process, because it'll just help them to be able to remove some fear, or to be more confident in what they're doing and in the direction that they're going, and be open to learning from others, because there's nothing wrong with that. And so that's what I gathered from the video.
Absolutely. And then Sammy shared here in the chat, I learned that I'm not the only person who has that fear. The idea of faking it being contagious really resonated with me. I can reflect back on so many situations where I can see that I was clearly faking it because of who I was with. Definitely relatable, Sammy. Thank you for sharing that. All right, so we've talked a lot about what authentic leadership is. Now let's look at putting it into action. And again, some of these are really going to relate to the discussion that we have been having here today. The first takeaway that I want you guys to leave today with is that a title is never as important as how you treat people. And Sean made a comment in our last session about people needing to know where you were coming from, or relate to your message before they would kind of go along with you. And Sean, if you want to put that quote back in the chat for everyone, that would be great. Mark, this slide kind of makes me think of you and the interactions that you just shared, because people might see you coming into those meetings as the man, you know what I mean? And they need to know who you are, know your heart, know where you're coming from, and that you're here to do it alongside of them and not to them, before they're gonna see your authentic self. So the description here, respect is earned through behaviors and actions, and sometimes that takes a lot of repetition. So demonstrating our authenticity one time isn't what's going to let other people know that that's truly who we are. It has to be a repetitive process. Your identity comes from how you interact with others, and you will earn the right to lead others when others are willing to follow you. So again, getting back to that quote that Sean just said in the chat, people need to know you care about them before they will care about what you know. So always keeping that in mind. And the action here is to be aware. Every interaction matters and everyone is watching. The next takeaway here is that people believe in you first and then your message. So again, a great build off of what we've been talking about. If people don't know you, if they don't know your intentions and they don't trust you yet, authentic leadership is all about building trust. They won't completely buy into what you're saying, what you're asking them to do, the group or project that you might be leading. If your integrity is in question, the power of your message is less impactful. When I think about authentic leadership, when I think about integrity, I always think about one of the best leaders that I have ever worked for in my entire life. And it was the very first job that I had. And she was always willing to get in there and do it with you. So she wasn't going to be the one just barking off the orders and making you go on your way to do it. She was always willing to jump right in the trenches with you. And that position, if someone didn't show up for the next shift, we were mandated to stay on. And if you were ever mandated, she would stay there with you to make sure that you had the help that you needed. And I so appreciated that about her. When we think about this takeaway, the action here is to think about the people that you work with and ask yourself, do they know who you are and what you stand for, both personally and professionally? Now, we don't need to get too personal because, again, understanding that this is a workplace and everyone has different levels of comfortability with that, but letting our guards down a little bit and letting people in isn't always so bad. We want to make sure that we're remembering our intent versus our impact. So people are going to know our intent if they knew who we are. The impact can come, though, negatively if they don't know who we are and they don't know where we're coming from and they perceive your message or your actions as differently as they're meant. The third takeaway, be respectful and transparent when communicating with others. So transparency was a word that came up very early on. And the reason why it's important is because transparent communication builds trust with each other. Keeping those open lines of communication is going to create comfort and prevent miscommunication. People will feel more comfortable asking clarifying questions if they need to, and that's just going to benefit the team all around. We want to make sure that we're providing feedback timely, clearly, and directly. And the action here is that the strongest leaders learn to listen first and then to speak. So we want to make sure that we're listening to everyone. We're all going to have an opinion, but listening is what can really take a good idea and turn it into a great idea. We don't always have all of the answers, even as knowledgeable as we feel like we might be in a situation. And then the final takeaway here is that we are always a work in progress. And that's exactly why we're going through this entire process together, this Leading at Every Level series. Because at times we're going to experience self-doubt and we need to make sure that we're building that network around us to lean on and to build us up. So just keep in mind that you won't always have the right answers and you don't have to, but we have to be willing and have the curiosity to find them. Sean added here in the chat, listen to understand, do not listen simply to reply. And that's a great point. Thank you, Sean. There's no need to fake it until you make it. So we talked a lot about faking it after watching that video. It's okay to be humble, it's okay to be vulnerable, and it's okay to ask for help when needed. So a quote that I love from one of my favorite mentors, she says, offer what you can and ask for what you need. We don't have all of the answers and that's okay, but knowing who you can lean on around you is not only going to make you a stronger leader, but it's going to build up others, nurture others, like we talked about in becoming a person of influence, and just build up those around us. So the action here is to lean on your team, your coworkers, your colleagues when you experience this. So making sure that we're letting people in enough so that we don't feel uncomfortable when we need to ask for help. So this is going to be the journal prompt for the leadership toolbox today, but I thought it would be a great way to close. We're not going to have time to think on all of these items, but I do want to have a little bit of discussion around them. Stop, Continue, Start is a great reflection tool that you can use with yourself, that you can use with a larger team, and it really focuses on what do I want to stop doing, what should I keep doing, and then what do I need to start doing. So I'm going to pull up a couple of prompts here. And again, you'll see these in your leadership toolbox today, so you'll have more time to reflect on them. But I'm curious if anyone would like to share. We already shared a lot about the first prompt, stop, what's preventing me from being my authentic self. Make sure that we're jotting those down so we know those are things we want to stay away from. But when it comes to continue and start, what will you continue to do in order to influence those around you to be their authentic self? And what will you continue to do to be your authentic self? And then start, what do I need to start doing for myself and others? So if anyone would be willing to share in the comments or come off mute, that would be great. And if you need some time to think on it, that's fine too. Give it a few minutes here for you guys to gather your thoughts.
So I remember being in school and the teacher says, would say there's no stupid questions.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I will continue to do to encourage others around me to be their authentic self is just, there's no stupid questions. And a lot of times when you're in conversations with others, like you bring something to the table that they may not know or be aware of. And so don't be afraid to share your lived experience, especially when it comes to identifying solutions needed to make your community better,
mm-hmm.
As well as personally, like in your pathway to whatever you're trying to head to, it, whether it's a career or just living a better life, be willing to reach out to others, whether you have a mentor or just a friend or a peer to help hold you accountable, as well as be able, someone you trust, to be able to share what you're thinking, your struggles, your challenges, and your successes, so you can celebrate that together. And so as long as you have someone to support you in the work that you're trying to do, whether it's self-improvement, professional improvement, be able to be aware of where you're struggling, what your strengths and weaknesses are, and work better to strengthen. Look at your strengths as assets, and don't worry about the weaknesses, because again, find something that you love doing, and and try to get paid for it, and you'll and
That's the ultimate goal.
Right.
Thank you so much. That's great. I love what you said about don't be afraid to share your lived experience. We all come from our own unique background, our own unique lived experience. And then on the opposite side of that, I would just like to encourage everyone, if you have a differing view or a differing opinion, let that be your prompt to turn to wonder, to really try to understand where other people are coming from, because that's an important part of not only being our true selves, but letting our walls down and understand who each other's true self is as well. As soon as you start to get into that defensive mode because it's not something you agree with, that's what's going to prevent others from doing the same. Thank you so much for sharing that. Donna Tanner, thank you. In the chat, she says, I will start using the journaling prompts from the toolbox. They are there for a reason. And I know that journaling is something that we don't all do, but it's not something that we have to take time to do necessarily every day. Maybe you do it every week to reflect on the week. Those prompts are not required. They're just suggestions. And what you'll see is that those prompts will both build off of what we've been talking about and kind of what's to come. Katie Yellow, you say the impact of COVID on leadership and authenticity. Do you want to come off of chat, or I'm sorry, come off of mute and expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I can't help but think about these kind of core values and different topics we've discussed, and then add that layer of COVID on it. Mm-hmm. So just the challenge of having influence of others, or the challenge of kind of leading within these new environments that are work from home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it takes extra work. We already know that this takes work, but that adds a layer of extra work. But it's not to say that it can't be done. So thanks for bringing that up.
Thank you.
All right. Any additional comments as we wrap up today? James, I will continue educating myself on leadership in order to grow in my leadership abilities. That's great. Thank you, James. And a lot of, the things that we're going to be talking about through the rest of this series, you're going to see or recognize these abilities in yourself already, because like Jessica Huntley says, I love this quote, Jessica, I think about it so much. We all have not only the ability, but the responsibility to lead. So it is within all of us, regardless of title, regardless of position, that inherent ability is there. It's up to us to do the work, to act on it, and influence those around us. All right, well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and leave you with one last quote or takeaway from today. Authenticity is not something that we have or don't have. It's practice, a conscious choice of how we want to live. Authenticity is a collection of choices that we have to make every single day. So like she said in the video, we have to ask ourselves, am I going to show up for others? Am I going to let myself be seen? It's a choice to show up and be real, a choice to be honest, a choice to let our true selves be seen. So with that, let me encourage you to let your true self be seen today and going forward. And I want to thank you guys for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and stop recording. And I will stick around if you guys have any questions or if you want to chat a little bit more. But continue to do the great work, continue to remind yourself why it is important to focus on yourself, to focus on your leadership ability.